Nacho Varga, he's a bad guy. He's a very bad guy.
But is he really? It depends on your criteria. Better Call Saul, alongside Breaking Bad, explores the moral ambiguity of its characters. In almost every decision they make, there's an argument that it was the right thing to do, either in self-defense or because the other character's life is worth less due to the moral crimes they've committed. But then there are certain actions and decisions that truly tip the balance over from relatively good to morally irredeemable. Most people have no problem saying Gus Fring, the Salamancas, or Walter White are reprehensible. But then characters like Mike or Jimmy are more sympathetic. We wouldn't say they're good, but we do see some good in them. And despite Jesse being a murderer and thief, people will still intuitively feel he's a good person, who just got caught up with the wrong people and was forced to make decisions that he would never normally make. But the entire test of morality isn't meant to be easy. It's meant to interrupt practicality and require sacrifice in order to preserve it. Like when Jesse stood up to Gus against using kids to peddle their product. At that moment, Jesse, whether he realized it or not, was deciding that this moral crime was worth his life. But then what about the tragic case of Nacho Varga? Certain characters like Jimmy and even Nacho's own father Manuel view him as a bad guy because of who he associates with and what he does. Yet characters like Mike see something different, someone sympathetic that's trying to do the right thing. So let's examine whether or not Ignacio Nacho Varga is a good person, starting with the main excuses for his bad behavior, and then we can look back at each individual action to determine whether it redeems his questionable ethics. The first factor is that Nacho doesn't believe he has a choice, that he's suffering from the painful reality that once you're in, you can't get out.
I'm not getting into anything, I'm in it. I've got no choice.
While his father consistently orders him to go to the police and rat out the cartel, Nacho knows that this will result not just in his death, but his father's, and maybe his entire family. This is what he believes will happen, but he does still have a choice. He's just choosing to value his life and/or his father's life over the potential harm he perpetuates by participating in a life of crime. But knowing that Nacho wants to get out, and that all of his actions are centered around him trying to get out, alters the complexion of his decisions, as a huge component of morality is intention. If he was someone that took joy in his position and just wanted more money and power no matter the cost, then he would seem like a much worse person. However, it's worth asking, if he was still committing the same crimes at the same rate, do his intentions make any difference? The whole point of morality is that it's about judging what you actually did, not necessarily accounting for what you felt or thought about it before or after. This leads directly into the second factor, self-defense. Nacho views his decision to continue to play ball as an act of self-defense and to protect his family. Generally speaking, self-defense is justified in a case of you versus your attacker. In a life and death situation that has been forced upon you, your will to survive takes precedence over the attacker's will to take your life or physically harm you. But can self-defense indirectly apply to you harming other people that are not attacking you, just because there's an overhanging threat that you might be killed if you don't? For instance, is it morally acceptable to punch someone because if you don't, someone else will kill you? What about if they just might kill you? You can also extrapolate that out to, is it morally okay to punch 2 or 3 people to avoid being killed? And at what point is it no longer worth it, from an individual perspective and a societal perspective? How about killing one other innocent person to save yourself or save a family member? These lines of thinking are comparable to Philippa Foot's philosophical theory of the train on the railroad tracks. If a train is heading down a track no matter what, and on one track there's 1 innocent person, and on the other track there are 5 innocent people, 90% of people will choose to send the train down the track with 1 person on it, to save 5 people. So it's all about harm minimization. But is that what Nacho does? More on that later. And the third excuse for Nacho's behavior is that the people he's harming are morally worse than him. This is a very common line of thinking, that when it comes to valuing a human life, we tend to look at the character of the individual and how much they have personally valued the lives of others. The more damage someone does to their fellow man, the less alliance they have to the human race, and therefore they deserve to die over someone that has treated everyone with respect and kindness. Then we enter a more morally grey area when it comes to the people that are in the game. Once you have chosen this life, you know the rules and are now at risk of bad things happening to you. The problem is that this is in direct contradiction to the first excuse of not having a choice, as it suggests once you make one mistake of getting involved with the wrong people, then your life is indefinitely worth less. But if it is just about how much harm you've caused in your position, then we must remember that Nacho has worked side by side with Tuco since he was a teenager, and has risen the ranks to the point that he has underlings to support him. So that suggests he's killed many people before to earn that level of fear and respect, not to mention the assaults, theft, and distribution of harmful narcotics. So if we were being consistent, we would have to conclude that his life is worth just as little, if not even less, than most other people in the game. As in this business, the higher you rise, the more morally corrupt you need to be. Now let's take a quick look through Nacho's behaviour from the beginning of the series to determine whether or not he's, on balance, a good person. The first time we meet Nacho is in the desert with Tuco. He's the one to assist by bringing Tuco the toolbox to start torturing Jimmy and the roller skaters. Unsurprisingly, that is bad. However, Nacho is the one to figure out the truth that Jimmy is just a lawyer, and using the argument that killing a lawyer could be bad for business, he recommends that Tuco cuts him loose. So from the beginning, we can see that his goal is to avoid harming innocent people, which is good. However, although Nacho is not seen committing any of the physical violence, he appears to be fine with watching Tuco breaking the roller skater's legs without a single objection, even though we know Tuco does listen to him. So although he's a force for good in this scene, he also enables bad. Later in that same episode, Nacho asks Jimmy for information about the Kettlemans because he wants to steal the $1.5 million from their home. He says he loves ripping off thieves because they have no recourse as they can't go to the cops. But the Kettlemans have done no direct harm to Nacho, and his plan of stealing the money is entirely for self-gain. They might be criminals, but so is he, and although that makes it feel like a wash, this is purely a bad action, as he's not planning to give the money back to its rightful owners. We then see that Nacho is happy to personally use threats to get what he wants, regularly threatening Jimmy's life if he rats him out. Now of course threats are not action, but intimidation is a form of force, so they count as bad. Then Nacho starts betraying the cartel to make some extra money on the side. This has nothing to do with getting out of the game, it's just about making money. Then once he sees that Daniel is no longer protected by Mike and is likely to get caught by the police, he yet again chooses to rip off a thief by robbing his home and stealing his father's baseball cards. This makes Nacho an opportunist who doesn't value anyone but himself, which is bad. He sniffs out weakness and preys on it, just like the rest of the cartel, but he also now does it to people that have helped him. It's only when Mike shows up and threatens to tell Tuco about his side business that he gives back the baseball cards. But in exchange for Daniel's vehicle so they can take it to the chop shop. So he still profited from his bad behavior. Does Daniel deserve to be robbed for being a criminal? No more than the Kettlemans, and by the same logic, no less than Nacho deserves to be killed or robbed. Next, Nacho wants to hire Mike to kill Tuco, as he claims Tuco is a loose cannon now that he's using again, and that he could turn on him any day, especially if he finds out about his co-curricular activities. When Mike finds a way to avoid killing Tuco, Nacho is surprised, and thinks all of this was a lot of work to not pull the trigger and do the world a favor.
You could have gotten twice as much for 1/10 the hassle. You would have done the world a favor? Just saying you went a long way to not pull that trigger.
This quote alone suggests that Nacho has killed many people in the past, as he minimizes the morality of murder. But it does raise the question, is it okay to kill someone that you suspect might kill you one day? For instance, if Daniel felt so scared that he wanted to hire someone to kill Nacho, would he be equally as justified? And is it not contradictory that his reasoning is that he doesn't want to be caught for dealing on the side, yet he considered Daniel worthy of punishment for helping him do just that? But really Nacho is applying a self-defense rationale here. Tuco is giving him no choice, as he can't just leave the cartel or he might become a rat, and if he stays, he's at risk of being killed if he doesn't play ball. So Nacho views this as a practical necessity to survive, but also a moral action, as Tuco will inevitably kill more people if he remains alive. So you could argue you'd be saving dozens of lives by wiping out just one. Later, when Nacho confronts Mike about robbing Hector's trucks, he sees that Mike is at risk of getting caught, and that may lead back to him as Mike knows too much. He's emotional, but let's not forget that Nacho does reach for his gun here. Mike warns him against it and he stops, but that instinct was still there. This is the same conversation Nacho reveals he just helped to bury a good Samaritan out in the desert, which explains why he's more on edge, but also reveals he's actively participating in the cover-up. If he had followed his instinct and killed Mike, it would still be an indirect form of self-defense, that maybe he has to harm someone else to save himself. But he would then be killing someone and helping bury an innocent person, just to look out for his own well-being. That's bad. But even with Tuco gone, the tragedy of Nacho Varga is that he still can't get out of the game. Now he's promoted to Hector's counter, so he's sandwiched between the lower level dealers and the Don who makes the decisions. It used to be Tuco forcing Nacho to be in the game, but now it's Hector. When Crazy 8 is short, Nacho wants to let him off the hook and pay next week, which is a good instinct. But once the order comes down from Hector, he has to beat him up to teach him a lesson. You could say that, in a way, Hector is really beating him up, and Nacho is a mere vessel, but does that make it okay? Normally we would say that the person who pulls the trigger is just as, if not even more guilty than the person who orders the hit, as they're the ones practically doing it. So does the same not apply here? Or is the looming threat of Hector enough to wash everyone else's hands? Also, later, when Nacho is in Hector's position and Crazy 8 is in his, Crazy 8 doesn't have it in him to attack the dealer, and Nacho has to be the one to do it. Maybe Crazy 8 isn't big enough or tough enough, or he views Nacho as a soft touch, but he makes a conscious choice to not take violent action, whereas Nacho does it just to keep up appearances. Once Hector decides to take over Nacho's father's family business, that's too close to the bone. And now Nacho decides he needs to wipe out Hector, as he knows his father is an honest actor and won't play ball, so therefore is at high risk of being killed. This decision to murder someone else surprisingly ticks a lot of moral boxes. He's protecting someone innocent, wiping out someone who's committed heinous crimes, and giving himself a way out of the cartel if he succeeds. He does have a choice, but he's making the choice to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. This should be his way out, but instead he's caught by Gus Fring, and now has no choice but to do whatever he wants, or his father will definitely be murdered. He used to just suspect his father could be killed, but Gus makes sure it's a known guarantee. As much as Nacho has done bad things, by this stage we can see that he's literally not in control of his own life anymore. His choice is either to die and let his father die, or do what Gus wants and inform on the Salamancas. The decision to protect his father requires a huge amount of sacrifice. He gets shot in the shoulder and belly so that the Salamancas won't suspect him, and to earn the twins' trust, he defends them by risking his life and shooting someone. You could say this was self-defense, but Nacho has now gone out of his way to protect the Salamanca twins. He could have just stayed in the car and let nature take its course against two violent murderers, but in order to be believable in his informant position, he feels he needs to continue to play the part. This was a choice, but the man he shot was potentially no more guilty or innocent than he is, so how many people deserve to die for Nacho and his father to live? We see this same issue arise again when Nacho lets the shooters into Lalo's home, and they kill all of his staff. Most of these people are security, so you could argue they're in the game, although less in the game than Nacho is. But the cook and gardener are innocent individuals, and yet Nacho enabled their murder to save himself and his father, even though he himself is not innocent. This is all a moral sacrifice he makes to keep his father safe, killing to protect the Salamancas, almost dying by getting shot, and enabling the death of innocent staff members in Lalo's compound. Yet he's never rewarded for this. His father is always looking down on him, kicking him out of his home, and telling him the only way out is to go to the police. not realizing that would lead to him being killed too. This makes Nacho's sacrifices even more commendable, as he does them all without emotional validation or reward. But the actual only way out for Nacho is to make the ultimate sacrifice, to do and say whatever Gus wants, and die. And he's willing to do that as long as Mike promises his father is safe. He could keep running, but this is a choice he makes, and it's actually why Nacho is a more moral character than anyone else we've seen in the cartel. In the Breaking Bad universe, everyone has a story, a justification for their actions. Walt would claim he did all of this for his family, so they have money when he's gone. Mike said the same thing, that he knows why he's here, that he has people to take care of after he's gone. But neither of them ever had to make that sacrifice. Walt went out by taking his revenge, and Mike went out against his will while trying to escape. But Nacho stepped up and proved what his real motivation was, and what he valued most. He was never the smartest or most effective player in the game. He was constantly caught between a rock and a hard place, and the more he tried to take the correct actions to get himself out, the deeper he was sucked right back in. And what's crazy is that if you didn't know better, all of Nacho's actions look like a man who's making a real play for the top, dealing on the side, trying to wipe out those above him. But his actual motivation was always to get out and keep his family safe.
I'm done. I want out.
Actions speak louder than words. We are what we do, not what we say, think, or feel. It's hard to determine whether Nacho Varga was a good person based on all the actions he took, and there are so many more crimes he committed that we don't even know about. But would the cartel really be a better place without him in it? No, it would still be led by Tuco or Hector until Gus found a way to eliminate them. It was always an unwinnable battle. As soon as one violent boss is taken out, they're replaced with someone just as bad, or even worse. But still, as much as he played ball and dished out damage on their behalf, in the latter stages of the series, Nacho's purpose was always to undermine and destroy the Salamancas from the inside. And although his father said the only way to redeem himself was to turn himself into the police, by the end of his story, there's an eerie peace about him regarding his final action, as if he finally accepts his fate, knowing he tried to do what he could while he could to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. But what do you think? In the end, was Nacho Varga redeemed, or merely put out of his misery? If you enjoy content like this and want to see more of it, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, as it really does make a difference to how much content I can pump out. Or if you can't afford that, then simply like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment down below to help the algorithm do its thing.